afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Books in the World. Books in the World is a production of the Cape Cod Writers Center, and I am Madeline Mealy-Holt, your host. I am the Vice President of the Cape Cod Writers Center. And we have been hosting these book talks for over 40 years, and the Writers Center itself has been conducting annual writers' conferences on Cape Cod for over 50 years. So this is a long tradition, and we have now tried to adapt to the coronavirus pandemic by offering some Zoom interviews, which gives us the opportunity to interview people like J.M. Crawford on a Saturday morning when we can't travel very far and it's very cold outside. So welcome, Joanna. How are you? Good morning.
Thank you, Madeline. I'm staying warm inside.
Yeah, that's good.
Doing well. Yeah.
Yeah. So J.M. Crawford is the author of Choices, One Mother's Determined Search to Find the Supports She Needs for Her Aging Autistic Son. It is quite a read. It's very heartwarming and very motivational, but she does offer a very candid narrative of all the stress that she went through throughout her son's life. And I recommend it to anyone who has a similar or any other journey that causes a lot of anxiety and needs the motivation. If you need motivation to get the job done, you should really read this book. It's quite inspirational. So, Joanna, please come and tell us a little bit about what happened in your life with your son.
So, before we started recording here, we were talking about the blurb on the back of the book. So I'd like to go ahead and read that if I
That's
can.
good.
At age 2.5, my son still wasn't speaking, but the doctor assured me boys are slow. By age 3, he was diagnosed with severe autism. I was told he probably would never speak, never feed himself, never dress himself, a doom and gloom list a mile long. Autism was a strange word to me. I was in shock and disbelief at the same time. I quickly became a one-woman campaign in search of supports for my aging son. The challenges kept coming with each passing year. Entering adult services would prove to be the greatest challenge of all. Autism changed everything.
So you had a tough life. Things were not going all that well, and then this happened. Can you just give us a little narrative about what happened then?
Sure. I think any parent with a child with disabilities has an extra complicated facet of life. There are many people that go through life, and many divorced people. People move, people get illnesses, but when you throw something like a disability into the mix, it gets very complicated. I was in a marriage that wasn't working, and there was alcoholism, a bit of domestic violence. We moved to the Cape, and I was in the middle of my divorce. My son was newly diagnosed, and I was moving in with my parents because I had no job. So 2 kids and a dog descending on my parents. Not very fun for them.
Wow.
Yeah. But over the years, somehow I managed. And I think going back to what you said in the beginning, this story is also about, not just about autism, but it's also about courage, and it's about change, and it's about building resilience. and staying the course and not giving up.
There's some interesting things that happened in your life, that how you had to draw attention to your son's needs, and we'll get to that in a minute. But before we do that, just would you just mention the statistics regarding autism, and even the difference in the rate of autism between when your son was diagnosed? Let me jump in and say your son is 27 now. And
yes, soon to be 28.
yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yes.
did the job. You got him quite far. So what are the statistics about autism?
So when my son was born in 93, 1 in 150 were diagnosed. Back in 2015, when I was writing my book, it was 1 in 68. Then as I went to publish, it jumped to 1 in 59. And this past year, March in 2020, the CDC released the statistic of 1 in 54. So I don't know, if that's because of early diagnosis or the rate is increasing because of environmental influences, but irregardless, it's rising at an alarming rate.
I understand that it's not clear as to why that is. And as you said, maybe it's early diagnosis, and perhaps when your son was diagnosed, it was already a little later than it is being diagnosed now. So that's an interesting and possibly encouraging fact for parents to learn earlier. But then what were some of the educational challenges that you had for your son when he was quite young, and then as he grew older, what were some of his needs?
Well, my son is nonverbal. He doesn't speak or have normal conversation. He doesn't understand. So communication was an extreme challenge. And because he didn't speak or doesn't speak, when he wants something or is frustrated, he'll act out. So I ended up having therapists teaching me how to actually be with my son. Navigating my way through this was not an easy task. Even when he finally was enrolled in preschool, when I first landed on the Cape, he was too old for early intervention and he was too young for preschool. And so I took him for a second opinion and was able to get a written order from a neurologist to at least get him some speech therapy, because he was hanging in limbo for 6 months. And I had no idea what to do. I had never heard the word autism before. So I was newly divorced and new diagnosis and new place to live. And it was a little crazy.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the inspiration of your story, is that you had an ability to put your feet on the floor when you got up every day and do the next thing, no matter what it was. And I know that this is part of the message that you want to convey, and part of the reason why you wrote this book. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I think, if there are only a couple things that people take away from this story, regardless of whether you have a child with autism or not, is that, but especially for those who do, is that you always have a choice. And no matter what, even if it's to do nothing, you always have a choice. It's still a choice to do nothing. And that your voice matters, that you should speak your truth and don't give up. Keep speaking. Somebody will hear you. Somebody heard me.
quite interesting. As you are about to tell that story, I'm kind of flash forwarding a bit as you went through actually being successful in getting some good living situations for your son as he got older, but that wasn't the easiest thing in the world. And then how did you get involved with the great success that you eventually had? What was your sort of, I think, if I remember the book correctly, you had some low points and you just, again, put your feet on the floor and got your pen and paper, and what happened next?
Yes. So I think also when I talk about takeaways from the story, that people not only need to stay the course, but believe in possibilities. And that's what I did. And I sat down and I wrote a letter to President Obama. And who knew he would answer me? But I put it out there, and I never asked him specifically for anything for my son. I just told him my story. And I told him about the need and the rising numbers. And I asked him to make autism a topic of national conversation, you know, that if we didn't start figuring out how we're going to take care of this population, it could break the healthcare system. Well,
Your
I was just
letter
going
was read by someone who was dedicated to healthcare issues. Was that a particular person? Did you ever hear back from? How did that work?
Well, I received a letter, a reply from President Obama, which I was shocked. I thought it was junk mail at first. And after that letter, a couple months later, I got a phone call, and President Obama had asked one of his people on the committee for the president's committee for the intellectually disabled, and we talked for about an half hour. Yeah. And he said if there were any other questions, he would send me his email address and I could contact him. And so probably a month or so later, that's exactly what I did, because I was in the midst of a major challenge with transitioning my son into adult services. And I didn't know where to turn. So I turned to him. And that began a 8-month online email conversation. Yeah.
Did you also, excuse me, did you also get in touch with Elizabeth Warren's office?
I did. So after I had sent the letter to President Obama, I was telling a friend about it, and I was like, well, I just took a chance, I was hoping somebody would read it, and I didn't expect I'd get a phone call. But after I sent the letter to President Obama, I was telling a friend, and she said, well, why don't you send a letter to Elizabeth Warren, which I had never thought of. So I remembered I had gone to hear her speak at a local coffee shop in town when she was campaigning back in 2011. And I was lucky to meet her personal assistant, who gave me her card. And I put it in my wallet, and I still had it. So I emailed her. And yes, I did hear back. And I was introduced to her aide that was working on autism policy. And she also called me. We arranged for a phone call and we spoke on the phone. So I was blown away with the
Yeah.
responses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what you achieved was very interesting because it was at a time when you were having a struggle to get your son placed in adult rehab programs. Am I correct? And
Yes.
that was not being handled very well.
Yeah.
And without going into the details of state responsibility and that kind of thing, I think your efforts were, of course, motivated by your absolute need to do something about this, but you were able to bring the problem to the attention of some very highly placed people. And I think we'll leave it to the reader to find out how it all worked out, unless you want to further comment. I mean, you did get him settled, and he is settled. And
Right.
along the way, it was really tough. I have to admire your forbearance and kind of insulting treatment. I mean, I guess I'm giving it away now, but I'm a reader, and this is how I was affected.
I think as parents of special needs children, we have to advocate for our children. It's just ongoing. It doesn't end. I mean, I've spent over 20 years, searching for doctors and therapies and fighting for services and advocating for his rights. And I didn't know that. I felt like this was presented to me as another leg of the journey. Here's the transition. And instead of a transition, it was a major challenge.
Yeah.
So I think parents like me are used to coming up against, services that their child may need, but it's not always offered. And I think that, my story is an example of you need to ask, just ask, and then, insist or find a way to get those needs met. We're often, we're often not heard. And this is why I say to speak your truth, because especially as women, we're dismissed a lot. We're often dismissed, and our voices aren't heard. And we're trying to meet the needs of our children their whole lives. And it becomes an uphill battle with schools and agencies.
Another aspect of your story, when you said something about women not being heard, and something else you said about friends, when you shared your story with friends, friends gave you some tips about and ideas. It's something about being open and being a determined woman that led you to actually apply for a Habitat for Humanity house, which I think is an interesting part of your story. And I mean, Habitat for Humanity is obviously, in my mind, an organization that does it does good for people in a way that is so unique and so needed. But it's not easy to get a house. And you did it. And that's part of your story. And I think I'm glad you wrote your story, because it illustrates determination. It's not so much that you got the house, although that is a marvelous, wonderful thing.
It's a blessing for sure.
It's a blessing, and but it was determination and luck in a way. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Of course. Well, I always had this vision of having my own home. I didn't know how I was going to get it. Because with the challenges, being a single parent is difficult enough. But when you have a child with autism as well, you have challenges about, finding daycare. So it's difficult to work. So I needed an income, but applying for the house was just one more thing of, putting it out there. And Habitat was not the only affordable housing organization that I applied to. There were a couple of others. And I just kept trying. And when the opportunity, because I actually did apply for Habitat 2 years before I got this house, and I did not get it. But I tried again. And this one I got 2 years later. And literally, they pulled my name out of a hat.
Oh my.
Yeah,
So
that's what I was told.
You are blessed in certain ways. Well, we're coming to the end of our time here, and I just wanted to encourage people to get in touch with you. You have a blog. Would you please share with the listeners the best ways to follow up, get your book, talk a bit about your blog? You have a couple of minutes left.
The blog is jmcrawfordwrites.wix, and I write about autism, of course, but I also write about everyday things, everyday challenges, just sometimes funny, sometimes thought-provoking experiences. And I also have a Facebook page, an author Facebook page, again, under J.M. Crawford, and an autism community page. And it's simply autism awareness. And I post articles and share other people's books and, whatever is happening in the news. Well,
I want to encourage people, writers who are thinking about their own memoirs and stories. This is Joanne's first book. It's a great read. You told me it started as a blog, and one thing led to another. And I met Joanne through a Zoom Cape Cod Writers Center meeting, and that's how we got together. So you never know, one thing leads to another, and
that's right.
I'm so happy that things have worked out for you, and thank you for making the time and sharing your story, and I wish you great success, and all your readers who have such problems, I wish them success as well in going along the journey as you did. So, Joanne, thank you so much for coming on Books in the World.
Oh, thank you. And I just want to add that the book is on Amazon. So,
right. And in Brewster, and probably when bookstores people are traveling around and you can go around and make sure they're on the shelves, you might be doing that as well, as many authors do. So,
right.
Good talking with you. Have a good day. And thanks again for coming on Books in the World.